This is the long version. What follows is a laboratory shown one frame at a time. Each frame carries a question in plain words, the command that answers it, and the output that command actually printed. Nothing in it asks you to accept a summary. You are being handed the receipts. The film opens in the repository's words rather than in ours. 3 lines from a file that has sat in the tree a long time, with its path, its line range, and the digest of exactly those bytes underneath. Clone the repository and hash those same lines. They should match. And this is what stands behind that sentence. Every claim in that document ships with the specific change that would break it. On screen is one of them. Alter an update equation in the way it names, and a named gate stops holding. It tells you where to put the crowbar. Here is the same treatment applied to the project's own shortcomings. The command prints every identifier declared as something the system does not do. There are 9 today, and the frame carries the tail of that list. The note beneath says which repository the count covers. Now the code behind that list. The page declares that it is generated from annotations sitting in the source, and that a gate regenerates it and refuses any difference. The paragraph under it gives the reason, and the reason is about people rather than about software. Read it and decide. Not one figure in this film was typed. Each is an expression run against a real file at the moment the frame was built. The line on screen is that register reporting how many expressions it carries and how many failed to resolve. Run it after you clone, and compare. And this is why. The file explains itself in its own header. This project's governing banner carried hand-typed figures that went wrong within hours, and one of them within minutes of being written. A banner can be corrected in a day. A film is rendered once and watched for a year. The film is treated the way it treats everything else. This check forbids a list of words, rereads every quoted line range and hashes it again, and rederives each figure from the file it came from. The second count on that line is deliberate sabotage it was required to catch. That is what this work is for, whole and unsoftened. Nothing has been trimmed off it to make it easier to say out loud. The amber rail and the header are the point. None of that frame was measured, and none of it is offered as a finding. It is where the instruments are pointed. And here is a finding about that mission. Searched across all 3 repositories of the estate, those words appear in no file outside this film's own directory. The mission arrived by conversation. This film is its first written home, and the repositories cannot corroborate it. Repairing that is the operators. One more before the tour begins. That is the exact commit these frames were built from. Everything you are about to be shown can be held against it. Clone it that hash. Run the commands the frame's name, and compare what your machine prints with what mine printed. 5 bodies, a colony that acts inside a world, a producer that would direct a broadcast, a laboratory that models a bacterial motor, a control plane that records what the others did, and a public record. They are kept apart on purpose. Each one is about to be shown in its own source. Body 1 is a colony acting inside a world. This is its boundary. In the file that enforces it, sentences go in on one line, one action comes back, and the code puts the word only in capitals. The brain never sees raw world state. The body never sees beliefs. Here is what that body has not done. The gate that would test the colony's foraging claim raises before it reaches the colony. On screen is the line number and the block it raises. It is a named shape with a contract and no result, and the file says that about itself. Body 2 would direct a broadcast, which shot, which cut, when to hold. Read what it runs on. Expected free energy minimization. No scripted rules, no reward. The thing that would point the camera runs the same mathematics as the thing it would broadcast. That is the sentence on screen, not a summary of it. It cannot. This program takes every path to air in this code base and records what refuses it. Of those paths, 0 are allowed right now, and the reason is the least flattering one available. The door has no key. There are 0 presence token minters anywhere in the tree. The claim level under the frame is the guard's own word. Both of those bodies run one engine, and this is its dependency list. Nothing between the brackets. It declares 0 hex dependencies. That is not offered here as a virtue. It is what makes the no-language model claim checkable in one command instead of by trust, because there is no library an inference call could hide inside. Body 3 models a bacterial flagellar motor. This is the boundary its strongest result states in the file that computes it. Held out duration prediction, 1 frozen cohort, 1 scoring rule, 2nd scale. Escherichia coli behavioral evidence, and nothing else. The scope is on screen instead of a summary of the scope. The same function states what that result does not reach. 5 rungs above duration only are untouched in either direction. 3 of them cannot be closed from inside this state at all. Transfer needs another dataset. Intervention needs an apparatus. Independent replication needs somebody who is not us. No verdict has yet been authored about a real scientific claim. Body 4 records what the other 4 did, including what they got wrong. Every entry names the hash of the entry before it. The command counted 32 entries, no broken links, and an anchor whose declared length and head match the chain it anchors. Watch the next frame before you carry that agreement anywhere. Here is what that agreement is worth. Independent custodians corroborating the record number 0, and that is the whole finding. The off-box machine accepts the writer's own key, so a second domain the writer can reach is not a second domain. Temper-evident, and not unforgeable. Body 5 is the public record, and this is the hole in it. 1 of 34 registered gates have a row. Writing those rows is a stop condition, the operators, and not work an agent may do, so the instrument prints the exact missing line and then stops. That number was measured against this sentence, which is not ours. It is the record's own schema, with a digest of those bytes. Every gate the project claims must be represented there, key to a real receipt on disk. The record holds no register of scientific verdicts to count, which is why that figure is declared rather than measured. This is why the bodies are kept apart, and why nothing here is quietly left out. A node the renderer cannot draw fails the whole picture rather than vanishing from it. A hole is invisible. You cannot notice what was never rendered, and that sentence is the reason this movement showed you the gaps. 2 words do a lot of work in this project, and they are not the same word. One kind of live means a surface opening a file on disk again the moment you ask it to. The other means something reaching an audience. The next frames separate them, and each one is a command. This is what reading disk looks like. The command ran while these frames were being cut, and it reports the film's own render code sitting modified, with capture files not yet committed. Nobody tidied the tree before pointing a camera at it. The lines are on screen. Read them. And this is the other half of that. A frame is worth something only if you can say which bytes it came from. Here is the commit hash, the moment it was written, and the sentence its author left on it. Clone the repository, check that hash out, and run the same commands. Before the surfaces, the instrument that watches the instruments. A check here must exit 0 when, and only when, it also printed the word pass. This command runs them and reports whether that law held. On screen with it, the gates that are listed and never run, counted as unrun rather than as a pass. The second sense of live, and this is the adverse one. A program here attempts to broadcast, deliberately, down every path this codebase offers, and writes down what refused it. Nothing gets through. The reason is the least flattering one available. The door has no key, and nothing in this tree makes one. A refusal is worth checking too. This suite hands the guard a stale token, a forged one minted with no person present, and one replayed from an earlier session, and requires a refusal each time. The verdict line is on screen. So is the guard's own word for what it is worth. Now the engine underneath all of that. Almost every system that chooses an action is pointed at a number it is meant to push upward. This one is not. What follows is the line in the code that says so, the search behind that line, and the test that fails if a reward-shaped key ever appears in the metrics. Here is the sentence, in the file, with its line number and the digest of exactly those bytes. It is one line of module documentation at the top of the brain. A comment is not enforcement, and this film is not asking you to take it as any. It is asking you to read it. So here is the search. It reads every module of the brain for the word reward and prints the lines that carry it. What comes back are comments, and the ones on screen say there is none of it. A word search finds a word, though it cannot find a reward implemented under a different name. And this is what makes that line more than a comment. The test runs an episode, takes the evaluation metrics, and refuses if any of 4 forbidden key names turns up among them. Read what it fences and what it does not. This is the evaluation surface. Not every channel a signal could take. If not a reward, then what? This is the answer, and the fence around the answer. In one paragraph the author wrote together. It rolls beliefs forward and scores expected free energy over futures the agent expects to hold. The same paragraph says what that is not. Both halves stay on screen. A claim that no foreign computation happens in here is worth little unless somebody can check it in one move. So the frame shows the dependency block of the build file, printed as it is written. There is no library an inference call could be hiding inside. Here is the adverse fact inside this movement. The check that would graduate the colony's foraging claim does not run. It raises, and the frame gives you the line number and the block around it, lifted out of the file rather than described. It has a name, a contract, and no result. Back to the engine, and to the piece that is easiest to picture. In theoretical biology, the boundary separating a thing from its world is called a Markov blanket. In this codebase it is a pipe between two processes. The module documentation says exactly that, and it is on screen with its digest. And this is what the pipe carries. Exactly two kinds of message ever cross it. Senses going one way, one chosen action coming back. The line ends in the conditional independence the arrangement is meant to enforce, written as the notation rather than as a paraphrase of it. And this is the part worth sitting with. Neither side gets the other's inside. The brain is handed senses and never raw world state. The body is handed an action and never a belief. One line in, one line out, in lockstep. That is the whole interface, and it is on screen. A claim in this project carries one word that says what kind of claim it is, and that word decides how it is drawn. This movement shows the vocabulary, the drawing rule, the verdict words, and the ledger they land in. Each one is read out of the file that enforces it. Before the vocabulary, the reason for it. This is the opening of the module documentation of the thing that decides what an operator is shown. The second paragraph names the risk it was built against. The file, the line range, and the digest of those exact bytes are underneath. Here is the whole vocabulary on one line, 6 words, and a claim carries exactly one of them. What is on screen is not a summary of that attribute. It is the attribute, at that line number, with the digest of those bytes beside it. Count them yourself. And this is what the word does. One clause per class, each naming a material, and a final clause that catches everything the function could not read and sends it to fog. That last clause is on screen with the rest. It was dropped from a first draft of this film and the rehash caught it. 6 classes went into 5 materials on the frame before. 2 of them share a row and a material, so the picture cannot be read backwards to the word behind it. The module says so in its own heading, and the sentence under it names what a surface must not do. The order on this frame is the part that carries the weight. The receipt is tested first, and the class only after. A node with no receipt draws as fog whatever word it declares. Underneath are the 3 ways a receipt can fail to be there, and why absent and nil are kept apart. This is why there is nowhere on a node to write a sentence. The comment names the obvious implementation, a word filter over a caption, and says what it would get wrong in both directions. What follows is the closed list of keys a node may carry. There is no prose key in it. A gate's outcome uses a different vocabulary, and this is all of it. 5 words, and no percentage anywhere in the schema. A score can be averaged until a failure disappears into it. These cannot be averaged at all. The description defining the 2 least comfortable of them is the schema's own, not ours. One command, one law. Across every gate the registry holds. A check may exit 0 only when it also printed the word pass. The line on screen is what the runner printed. The note underneath is the ledger's own count, last row per name, and the fail is in it at the same size. Now the sentence governing that ledger, quoted from the schema itself. Every gate the project claims must be represented there. Key to a receipt on disk. Measured while this frame was being made. 1 of 34 registered gates have a row, the rest do not. This packs the evidence, ships it, unpacks it, then forges it on purpose and requires the forgery to be refused. 1 line came back and it is on screen. The note underneath is what the pack is worth. Tamper evident, and not unforgeable, with the count of independent custodians beside it. A receipt is a file and a line. This opens everyone in the registry, then breaks the registry on purpose to check that the opening notices. 1 line came back. The note underneath is what the check says it cannot settle, whether an anchor is the right anchor. The last frame of this movement is the rule about the word that means somebody looked and could not tell. You may stand in it. You may not author a verdict from inside it about a real scientific claim. This project has authored no verdict at all. The next movement starts here. This next stretch is not a disclaimer reel at the end of a pitch. It is the part of the film the rest of the film is for. Every fact in it gets its own frame, its own command and its own output, at the same size as everything you have already been shown. A program here attempts to broadcast, deliberately, down every route this codebase has and records what refuses it. The count of routes and the count it is allowed down are both under the frame. The last line the program printed is its own limit, not its own strength. The guard states its own worth in its own file, and the word is presence evident, carried in every refusal and every grant it emits. Read the sentence about an agent already sitting inside the operator's desktop session. That is the case this guard says it does not cover, written by whoever wrote the guard. The token that would open this door is created nowhere in the repository. Minting it belongs to the operator, and until he rules on it the guard refuses every route, including his. A door that turns away everyone is not a strong door. It is an unbuilt one, and it says so. A refusal is worth nothing unless something tries to break it. This check forges the token, ages it past its expiry, replays a spent one, and asks from a session with no human in it. Each attempt is required to be turned away. The line it printed is on screen. This is the sharpest number in the film, and it is put on screen without a sentence wrapped around it. Of the gates this project registers, that many appear in its canonical evidence record. The rest do not appear in it at all. The instrument recomputes both counts every time it is asked. The requirement is not something this film brought with it. It sits in the schema that governs every row of that record, in capitals, in the description the schema publishes about itself. Hold it beside the previous frame. The distance between the two is the whole of this scene. This is not a defect waiting for an agent to repair it. Writing rows into that record is a stop condition. The operator signs them and no agent may author one. The desk's whole job is to print the exact missing line and then halt, which is what you are reading. The field above this comment once held a written sentence instead of a computed one. It stopped being true the day a row landed, and it stayed wrong for a fortnight inside the instrument whose numbers, 2 lines further up, were right. The comment stays, so does the correction it records. A record only its author can vouch for is worth less than one a stranger can check. This counts the parties outside this machine that corroborate the evidence here. The box that was meant to be the second domain answers the writer's own key, so no custodian sits anywhere the writer cannot reach. A second domain the writer can reach is not a second domain. That sentence is not narration, it is the limitation as the repository declares it, with its claim leveled directly underneath. This film does not upgrade that word anywhere, and neither does the file it came from. The chain verifies and the anchor agrees with it. That frame is placed here, beside the custodian count, on purpose. Anyone holding write access to the store rewrites the ledger and its anchor in one move. Agreement is a real property, and it is not corroboration by anybody else. Pack survives a round trip and a tampered one is refused. The same run records the case it cannot catch, edit the payload, recompute the manifest and the tag manifest, and the forgery verifies clean. The gate says that itself, at the foot of its own passing output. This is the check that would graduate the colony's forage claim. The command opens its runner, finds the first raise, prints the line number it sits on and the block that follows. It does not run the check. There is nothing in there yet to run. One line in the file, in the project's own words. The runner raises this before it touches the colony at all. Nothing about the colony's behavior has been measured through this gate, and the gate has never returned a verdict of any kind, in any direction. It is not a vague intention. There is a pre-registration written before any run, a named row in the evidence ledger, and a contract the scaffold locks in for whoever finishes it. What it has never had is a result. The verdict word on that row is on screen, and it reads pending. The strongest result here reaches held out duration prediction and stops. 5 levels above it are named in the same string and marked untouched, in either direction. That clause is doing real work. Untouched is not weak support. It is no evidence at all, for or against. That list was once written off by one. Every level above transfer read a rung higher than the evidence licensed, and independent replication had been left off the list entirely. The correction sits in the file, above the line it corrected, and it names what it corrected rather than quietly replacing it. 3 of those levels cannot be closed from inside this estate at any budget. Transfer needs a second dataset. Intervention needs a physical apparatus and a hand on it. Independent replication needs somebody who is not us, working from the published method. Full parity is not claimed here, and it is false. Each identifier on screen names a thing this project states it does not do, carried in the document that collects them. The count under the frame is for 1 repository out of 3. The document says that about itself, and records the omission as one of its own limitations. The page is not written, it is generated from annotations sitting on the line each limitation lives on, and a gate regenerates it and refuses any difference. A hand-kept list of limits drifts one way. Nobody deletes a limit that was fixed, and everybody forgets the one just found. That is the honest position, and it is the last thing this movement says. There is also no register of scientific verdicts anywhere in this estate to count, so this is the one figure in the film that is declared rather than measured. The missing instrument is the harder finding. The method behind this laboratory is written down, not as a paper, but as an encyclopedia and a cookbook, a circumflex euros chapters, recipes and a lexicon, in a repository of their own. The next frames count it, quote it, and then say plainly what stands between that corpus and you. 79 chapters, 130 concepts in the lexicon, across 8 registered domains. Not one of those figures is typed into this film. On screen is the tale of the run that resolved every number you will hear. Its first 3 lines are corpus counts, and its last is how many figures the register resolved without failing. This is how the corpus opens, not with a result, but with the kitchen, the governance discipline, the pantry, and the fence vocabulary that binds every recipe. Read this before you cook anything. Under the frame is the file, the line range, and a digest recomputed from those bytes as the frame was made. The corpus keeps a claim ledger separate from the chapters that read it, and it writes down in advance which of the 2 loses. Where a recipe and the ledger disagree, the ledger wins and the recipe is wrong. That sentence is in the book itself, not in a policy note filed beside it. The mission clause says free and open. Here is where the corpus stands against it today. 0 files tracked in that repository match a license or a copying notice, and its own exposure document opens with the words on screen. It is not public, and that part is the operator's statement rather than something this frame counts. And here is the reason it has not simply been opened. Making it public is one command. Making it private again is also one command, and that second command does not undo the first. What was already fetched stays fetched. The decision is the operator's, and the document says so in its title. This is the corpus grading itself. On its own first page, it names how many developmental runs it counts as earned, out of how many it lists. It calls the whole thing a simulation, a bounded peak, a toy world, never a person, and it fences its mathematical foundation as unrefereed, with a human review still pending. That last frame did not happen by accident. This is the rule that produced it. Wording is calibrated down to the measured value, and never up, including under urgency. The sentence at the end is the corpus's own summary of what that costs. The fence gets louder under pressure, not wider. The lexicon holds 130 concepts today. On screen is the note recording how it got there. A hand count, a validator that disagreed with it, and then a cut. The wrong figure was not overwritten. It sits in the file, on the same line as the correction, where anyone reading the count reads it too. And this is how it ends. The last chapter does 2 things. It shows where the numbers came from, and it hands you the knife. That is the same move this film makes. On the day the corpus opens, that closing chapter is the one to read first. 4 ways in, and they are not equal. Watching costs nothing. Asking a question lands it somewhere it cannot be quietly removed. Trying to break something is worth more to this project than the other 3 together, and most of this chapter is about why that is. The first door, watching, starts by naming the thing watched. So here is the commit, printed by the repository rather than by us. Clone at that line and every frame after this one is yours to rebuild. Nothing on this screen needs an account or a request. The second door, a question you ask, lands in an append-only file under version control, which is worth something only if append-only is enforced rather than promised. On screen is the strictest form of that shape in this estate, a chain walked end to end, and its count of broken links. The third door, here is the standing promise it rests on, quoted from the file that carries it, with its line range and digest beside it. Read that rather than take it from me. A claim nobody can imagine breaking is not science, a circumflex euros, and that sentence is the project's, not this film's. Start with what is already outside. This reads the published site against a declared list of everything it should carry, then prints the floors under it. Its last lines record a page withdrawn, because its bytes were not in the commit it cited. The count fell rather than the fence bending. Then the harder one. This holds each published page against the committed citation names, and afterwards says what it cannot reach from inside a single clone. Read those last 3 lines. They are a check declining to claim something, and the next 4 frames are what that declining leaves open. Here is the adverse one, and it is also the widest opening. The count of independent parties corroborating this record is 0, a circumflex euros. The far machine accepts the writer's own key, so a second domain the writer can reach is not a second domain. Standing outside this estate is a thing nobody inside it can do. The second adverse one. Of 34 registered checks, 1 appears in the permanent evidence record. The schema says every gate this project claims must be represented there. Both are on screen. Authoring the missing rows is signed by the operator, so it is open work no agent and no stranger may take. The third adverse one, and it is a piece of work with its shape already written and nothing behind it. This reads the runner for the colony science gate and prints the line where it stops. It raises before it reaches the colony. The pre-registration exists, the result does not. The fourth adverse one, and the reason a stranger is worth more here than another engineer. The strongest result this program holds reaches 1 rung of a ladder and says so in its own code. 5 rungs above it are untouched, and independent replication is not a rung anyone inside can climb. So here is the specific part. Every claim in the estate ships with the edit that would break it, and this is one of them, verbatim, with its digest. Perturb an update equation and a named Gates Jensen gap vanishes, or recompute the same equations yourself and diff them against these. The fourth door, this computes contrast, reads structure from the built pages, then names what it cannot measure at all, whether the words land gently for a frightened reader. That part stays a person's, and if any command in this film prints something else on your machine, send that back. This is the last chapter, and it does one thing. It states where the work actually stands. What follows gets the same treatment as everything before it. A question, a command, and the output. Nothing here is a summary of the film you have just watched. 9 limitations are declared today, and the frame carries the tail of that list. The page holding them is generated from annotations in the source, rather than written by hand. The line beneath carries the plan, steps carried, steps blocked, and steps no agent may take. If the page and the annotations disagree, the gate that regenerates it fails. Of the 34 checks this project registers, 1 has a row in the permanent record. The schema says every gate it claims must be represented there. The instrument prints the missing line and stops, because writing those rows is a stop condition the operator signs. The strongest result in the flagellar motor work is a held-out duration prediction, and this is the sentence its own code carries about what it does not reach. 5 rungs above it are untouched in either direction. Transfer needs another dataset. Intervention needs an apparatus. Independent replication needs somebody who is not us. Every number you have seen was an expression evaluated against a real file. 1 was not. This is that entry in the film's own number source, saying it cannot be measured, because there is no register of scientific verdicts to count. The missing instrument is the finding, not the figure. The mission again, in the same words, on the same amber rail that marks it as intent. Nothing on this frame was measured. It stands here after the state of the work rather than before it, and not one clause of it is smaller than it was in the opening. This is the file that governs everyone working on the project, quoted with its line range and its digest. Read the last sentence. No verdict has yet been authored about a real scientific claim. There is no register of verdicts to count from, so that line is a declaration and not a measurement. So the last frame is a command rather than a logo. That one remeasures every figure this film rendered, straight from the files it read. Clone the repository and run it. If your output disagrees with what you have just watched, the film is wrong, and that disagreement is worth more to us than the film is.